Guess what day it is?
Oh, no. I know where this is going.
I don't know if I can say that on air, but happy Wednesday. Jackson Lightcap alongside Matthew Pennington. Another episode of Sports Now. We have an action-packed show for you coming up here today as well. You're still
I'm sorry.
dying over there.
It's the, I don't know if I can say it on air. It's Wednesday. That's what got me. I don't know if I can say it on air. That's what got me.
We have an action-packed show. Of course, there is a lot going on in the sports world. We are live until 6. We are going to start this show talking about Game 2 in the NLCS. We'll also talk about Game 3 coming up tonight for the ALCS. We'll make our Week 7 NFL predictions, and we will also make our new hot takes for Hot Take Wednesday. Also, a lot of news going across the area as well. Caleb Williams reportedly wanting partial ownership in whichever team takes him if he declares for the NFL draft. That's all coming up. Our thoughts, opinions, and more coming up later on this show.
And yeah, another thing that we want to at least try to do, talking about the whole NFL predictions that we're going to have, talking about Jackson has brought it up a couple different times. We're looking at chat occasionally. If you want to be competing against us with your own picks for the week, if you drop them in the comments until we get a website or something set up where we can have people hop on the website, make their game picks, those be registered. Put it in the chat as long as it's in before Thursday. Your picks will count, and see how you can do it against Jackson and I.
We are live in chat. We see your chat right here on our production side as well, and you can actually see we can actually put your chat up on air as well. So leave us some comments, thoughts, complaints, criticism, whatever you want, the whole 9 yards. We are live in chat. Matt, Game 2 of the NLCS was played last night, and we both said yesterday we thought the Texas Rangers were the hottest team in baseball because they have not lost a postseason game. I will stand by and say they are the most underrated team in baseball out of the 4 teams remaining, but I am going to change my answer, and you and I were talking before the show. I know that you are too, spoiler alert. The Philadelphia Phillies, by far the hottest team in baseball right now. They must have listened to this show, heard us say that Texas, because they've been undefeated in the postseason, is the hottest team in baseball. They must have heard that, and they must have gotten mad or something. A 10-0 victory over the Arizona Diamondbacks, who are also a very good team.
If they heard anything, they heard me saying that Arizona's going to lose Game 1. It's going to be close, and then they're going to punch back in Game number 2. But 10-0 was the final score of that game. You want to talk? You said, and I brought it up before the show, the Phillies are the best team right now of the final 4 teams remaining. I was saying that Texas was the better team yesterday, but that's because the Phillies didn't continue what we saw in the early stages of Game 1 against Arizona. You know what they did yesterday? They did exactly what I expected them to do in the early stages of the game, in the early stages of Game number 1 against Arizona. They kept their foot on the pedal. They did not look back. 10-0 is a pretty convincing win in your second game of the series.
Yeah, 10-0. And, you know, Matt, this was a game that it felt like Arizona was in for the majority of the game. I mean, look at the box score. The Philadelphia Phillies did not open up the game until the middle stages to the late stages of the game. It was a 2-0 game heading into the 6th inning, and then the Phillies offense out of nowhere decides to just, hey, I'm awake, put up 4 runs. They did it again in the 7th. And the Phillies offense, that's what makes them so special, is they are so lethal. They are so lethal at the plate, and they can get hot like that. It is so quick, and you could be in the game, and then you face the top of the order or even the bottom of the order, swinging it back up to the top, and then it's, oh boy, where did the score go? It's now 10-0.
And the one thing I've got to say, you bring up the fact that it didn't seem like the Phillies offense was going to do too much yesterday, at least in the early stages of the game. Doesn't matter. Pitching a shutout. It doesn't matter if your offense doesn't get going at all. If you hold your opponent to 0 runs, if you somehow lose a game and hold your opponent to 0 runs, I don't know what world you're living in, to be completely honest with you, but when it comes down to it, you talk about the Phillies offense took a little bit to heat up in that game, but when it comes down to it, they, at the end of the day, didn't even need to heat up to take Game 2 of the series.
And, you know, Aaron Nola absolutely shoved yesterday. He was dominant. And I will also say this. He is raising his price. He is due to be a free agent this upcoming offseason. So he is making his case for being one of, if not the best starting pitcher out there on the market. And a lot of teams are going to have their hands in and trying to get a grab at Aaron Nola.
I'll tell you what will help his stock when it comes to next season. winning the World Series for your team. Not saying that it's going to come down to a Game 7, he's the starting pitcher for the Phillies, but when your team wins behind you 10-0 final score of the game in the NLCS, one, that already raises your stock up a little bit more with the fact that you pitched such a great game in this deep into the postseason, this deep into October. But not just that. If the Phillies can win the World Series too, and he has some good outings in the World Series, depending on how many games it takes for the Phillies, if they do end up winning the World Series, all it's going to do is raise his price.
Absolutely. And, the Phillies, their top of the rotation is stacked. Of course, Zach Wheeler, Aaron Nola, two aces on the team. There's no other way to put it. They are both ace pitchers in their own. I know I'm going to compare this to football terms, but you know how Cincinnati and the Bengals say that there is no true number one receiver on that team? They said that a lot coming into this season with T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, Tyler Boyd. Well, it's the same exact situation with the Philadelphia Phillies pitching staff. Zach Wheeler, Aaron Nola, they can go to almost any other team in Major League Baseball and be the ace. And I say almost every other team in Major League Baseball because you had the Luis Castillos, you have the Mariners, you have the Dodgers with Clayton Kershaw, so there are certain instances. But then you take a look at their third man in that rotation who will get the bump tomorrow for Game 3, Ranger Suarez, a young guy who has absolutely dominated in his young career as well.
And yeah, you want to talk about a confidence boost that Suarez can have is if he can get Game 3 in control of Philly when it comes to the pitching in that game. You talk about how young he is, but he's done good so far this season. That's only going to build his confidence that the Phillies can take it to a 3-0 lead.
And one thing that's great about the postseason is usually in the regular season you see a 5-man rotation, even sometimes a 6-man rotation. With the amount of off days that you have in the postseason, it would not surprise me that, yes, the Phillies, they could very well send a 4th man out there on the bump for Game 4. And usually in the regular season, starting pitchers have 4 days of rest. They pitch every 5th day. But pitch every 6th day, I beg your pardon. They have 5. No, I was right the first time. Sorry, I'm confusing myself here. Math is not mathing for me right now. Matt's the math whiz, but going back to what I was saying, in the postseason, you have more off days, more travel days, meaning you can shrink your starting rotation down. And with how the Phillies are lining up, it's very well possible we see Zach Wheeler once again on the bump for the Philadelphia Phillies come Game 4 this Friday in Arizona.
I wouldn't be surprised if we see Wheeler on the mound if Arizona takes game number 3 of the series. If it ends up being a 2-1 series and the Phillies kind of have it in their mindset of we want to put this away as soon as we can. But if the series goes 3-0, maybe put up a 4th in the rotation, let your 2 ace pitchers that you have on your roster have a little bit more rest. And obviously you want to keep the dominance going. You want to keep the momentum going. But being up 3-0 in the series, dropping game number 4, going to 3-1, and then having your aces come back after an extra day off, there's a really good chance you're going to move to 4-1 and take the series.
And Matt, this is a very pivotal game coming up tomorrow in Arizona. And frankly, I may even go out there and say the series isn't over, but it's over just because of the momentum that the Phillies have. But I am going to give the Diamondbacks a chance because Phoenix, Arizona is a very tough place to play. Chase Field, very tough place. The Diamondbacks are going to have their home crowd, their faithful behind them. And now we're going to start seeing the home field advantage go to the Arizona Diamondbacks. They have to feed off that. They have got to have a great series. And to be honest, if they want any chance in this series, because remember, if they were able to force a Game 5, they would have their next 3 games at home. Then they have to go back to Philadelphia for the final 2 games. And Philadelphia is the toughest place in baseball to play. And I'll say that right now. I'll even say that through the regular season. Philadelphia is one of, if not the toughest places to play as an opposing team. You do not want to go back to Philadelphia where it's Phillies have to win 1 to end it. I think that these next 3 games for Arizona are all must-wins. Arizona, if they want a chance in this division or in this championship series, they have got to take these next 3 games at home, all 3 of them. They cannot go back to Philadelphia where Philadelphia has 2 opportunities at home to clinch a World Series berth.
And yeah, that's another reason why I said if Philly ends up getting game number 3 tomorrow, then you maybe throw in that fourth arm into the rotation because you would have your second ace at home pitching in game number 6 of the series if you end up going to 3-2 on the series, going home to play in Philadelphia. The other thing I can't wait to see, how well are Phillies fans going to travel to Arizona? Obviously, it is a long trek from Pennsylvania all
It's
the way
not like
to
the
Arizona.
American League Championship
Yeah,
Series
you
where
just
they're
have to
still in state.
We just have to travel to a different part of Texas for the night. It's completely different.
I
in
will
the
say this, though.
American League.
Traveling through Texas sometimes does feel like you're crossing the nation.
Yeah, Texas is a pretty big state, but still, when it comes to Arizona to Pennsylvania, it's a little bit of a different story with how far you have to travel, but still, talking about how good the Philly faithful is, how good the Phillies fans are when it comes to showing up to games. It's like I said, I can't wait to see. I'm not going to say that there's going to be a boatload of Phillies fans in Arizona, but I'd like to see how well Philly travels to the Diamondbacks field.
Matt, what does Arizona need to do to absolutely kill the momentum and the motivation that the Phillies have right now and end up taking Game 3? Because obviously Game 3, they're off tonight. Today's a travel day. Game 3 starts tomorrow. This is a must-win game, and this is a do-or-die game coming up for the Arizona Diamondbacks. They cannot go down 3-0 in this series.
I'll tell you what Arizona needs to do. They need to get the bats going. 3 runs in 2 games in this series. Philadelphia has put up 15 runs in those 2 games. You got to get the bats going. Obviously, losing 10-0, it's a blowout game, obviously a dominant game by Philadelphia, but you'd love to see the bats get going at least a little bit for Arizona. So when it comes down to going home for game 3, 4, and 5 of the series, if we even have a 5th game with how Philly's been playing, if you're Arizona, you have to get the bats going because of the fact that even if you slow down the Phillies offense, we saw what happened when you slowed them down. They still put up 5 runs in the game. If you're Arizona, you got to get the bats going because you're not going to win the game only putting up 3 runs. Obviously, there's no chance of you winning the game if you put up 0 runs through all 9 innings, but you take a look at game 1 against this Phillies offense, you've got to put up more than 3 runs if you want to have a chance to take down Philadelphia right now.
And Matt, you just mentioned it. You take a look at Ranger Suarez, and Ranger Suarez, we mentioned, he is a young he's young, you know. He is 28 years old. He has been around for a couple of years, and playing with the Philadelphia Phillies, yes, he has that postseason experience. Yes, he's been in this situation. But when you look overall what the experience that Zach Wheeler has, that Aaron Nola has, it's obvious. Ranger Suarez is a great pitcher, but there is an obvious gap in between the Phillies' number 3 man, which is Suarez, and the Phillies' number 1 and 2 man, which is Wheeler and Nola. The Arizona Diamondbacks have got to take advantage of that. They have got to take advantage of that gap, and they have to feast off of it because the more they strike and the more they strike early, the more that's going to shake up Ranger Suarez's confidence. And not only that, but the more that's going to boost your team and motivate your team. Again, it's a must-win game for Arizona. Arizona at home, game 3, they have got to come out of the gates firing on all cylinders. No matter how, I think that a first inning run at home would go miles for this team. And it can't be a run where they're already down 3-0. They have to go out there, pitch a shutout in the top half of the first, and they have to strike in the bottom half of the first. The Phillies have been very comfortable all postseason long, especially in this series. The one time they were uncomfortable and they were on the heels, what happened? They ended up blowing a 4-0 lead against the Atlanta Braves, their only postseason loss. The Arizona Diamondbacks have got to make the Philadelphia Phillies uncomfortable.
Yeah, and the other thing that if the Arizona Diamondbacks can get the offense going early is the fact that what that's going to do is not just lower Suarez's confidence and lower what his production is going to be. That's going to throw it to the bullpen a lot earlier, and it's not going to, I wouldn't say it's going to burn out the arms of the bullpen, but the fact that you got a 3-game stretch at home, if you send it to the bullpen early in game 1, those bullpen arms are going to have a little bit of use and a little bit of wear on them going into game number 4 and 5 of the series. So if you can get Suarez off that mound early, say maybe the 4th inning, 5th inning, something along those lines, you've got to be doing pretty good on the offense to do that, though. But you're also going to end up, like I said, not putting too much strain on the Phillies' rotation when it comes to their bullpen, but you're putting a little more stress on it than what Philadelphia would want to have, at least in the earlier stages of game number 3.
here's my prediction. I'm not going to make this a hot take because I don't think this is necessarily a hot take. Here's my prediction. Tommy Pham, he is going to go off tomorrow. The number 3 hole hitter for the Arizona Diamondbacks. And now since I say this, yes, the broadcaster's jinx is out there. He's going to go 0 for 4 with 4 strikeouts. But I think that Tommy Pham's going to go off. He's been in the league for quite some time. He's played for multiple teams. He's been in these situations before. He is their veteran leader. In times like this, in trying times like this, you look for your veteran leader, and especially on an offense where the bats are ice cold. You mentioned 3 runs in the last 2 games, and there haven't been a whole lot of hits either. And outside of the 2-run home run in game 1 for the Diamondbacks, they've only put up 1 run outside of via the home run ball, the 2-run home run. Tommy Pham, he was dominant. He was the team leader in the regular season, played one of the best seasons of his career. He has got to continue that this upcoming game 3. He's got to carry it. He's got to get hot. He's got to prove that he's the veteran, and he's got to provide leadership, and he's got to be the one to get the bats going. Matt, you and I both played baseball. We both know hitting is contagious. 1 hit leads to 2. 2 hits lead to 3. 3 hits lead to 4. And even when you're getting out, well, it's not strikeouts or weak ground balls or weak pop-ups. You're putting great contact on the ball. It's just right at people. That's how baseball works. You want to know why the Philadelphia Phillies are so hot right now? It's because hitting is contagious. Every single player in the Phillies lineup is hitting. That's not just a coincidence. It's because hitting is contagious. The Diamondbacks, they got to start the snowball effect somewhere along the lines. Look for them to look for their veteran leadership, Tommy Pham.
And yeah, you talk about hitting being contagious. You take a look at some games that we've already seen so far this season. I mean, you take a look at Philadelphia in game number 1 of this series. Really early home run in that game. And then we saw 2 more solo home runs in game number 1 of this series against Arizona for the Philadelphia Phillies. Obviously, the bats ended up calming down a little bit as the game went on, but it was a quick start for Philadelphia, and they continued that quick start. Obviously, like I said, things started slowing down as the game had gone on, but they got the win. They moved on to, at the point, have a 1-0 lead on the series, and then now 10-0 win yesterday puts them up at 2-0. But like you said, when it comes down to hitting in baseball, when it seems like nobody can hit the pitcher, nobody can get anything going, nobody can get anything going at the plate and even make contact off of a pitcher and put it in the field of play or anything along those lines, once that one player breaks through and gets on base and gets that hit, it changes everybody's mindset on the bench thinking, hey, we can get some hits here. We just saw Tony get a hit. We can go out there and hit this guy too. Let's get at it. It's the confidence that needs to be built in this Diamondbacks team. Like I said, 3 runs through 2 games. There's not a lot of confidence in that batting order right now for Arizona. So if you want to have a chance to go make the series 2-1 in game number 3, you've got to start batting, or you've got to start hitting the ball early.
Absolutely. Matt, it's time for a break, our first break of this Wednesday show. We are live until 6. When we return, we're turning the page, and we're going to talk about Game 3 upcoming for the ALCS. First pitch of that will be thrown tonight, and it is a must-win game for the Houston Astros on the road. We're take a break. We'll be back.
Come on, guys, let's call Daddy. Hi, Daddy.
Hi. How you doing?
So the furnace is on its last leg, babe. And I just don't know what to do.
I wish I could be there to help.
Being away is always difficult, but it doesn't mean you can't make decisions together. You can count on us to keep your family comfortable.
Hey, buddy, how's it going?
When are you coming home?
It's gonna be soon. Faster than you know it, I'll be home.
Breathe easy. Choose McAfee.
How you doing?
So the furnace is on its last leg, babe. And I just don't know what to do.
I wish I could be there to help.
Being away is always difficult, but it doesn't mean you can't make decisions together. You can count on us to keep your family comfortable.
Hey, buddy, how's it going?
When are you coming home?
It's gonna be soon.
Faster than you know it, I'll be home.
Breathe easy. Choose McAfee.
We welcome you back here to the TKDS Sports Network. Jackson Lightcap alongside Matthew Pennington, our engineer, Kevin Fowler. Just another reminder, folks, tomorrow is our big show from 4 to 7. We are live. Yes, this is a show that's normally 4 to 6, but Thursdays are our special edition show from 4 to 7. Join Matt and I as we talk about the OHSAA football season.
Don't mind me. I've got an eyelash right now. I look like I'm crazy. I know I look like I'm crazy on camera right now, but I got an eyelash in my eye. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, so we will talk about the updated playoff picture heading into Week 10, all of the great conference championship games coming up this upcoming week. That's all coming up tomorrow from 4 to 7. And actually, Matt, we're going to have our first guest on this show within the new format as well. So if all goes well, we'll be having our first guest on the show. Cannot wait for that. Moving on, let's go and turn the page into the American League Championship Series, where the Rangers lead the Astros 2-0. They stole the first two it's quite the opposite than what we've seen in Philadelphia. Philadelphia, the home team, won the first two games against the Diamondbacks. The Rangers, who were the away team, won the first two games against the Astros. Now they get to go home up 2-0, and really it's a make-or-break game 3. 8 o'clock first pitch coming up tonight. The Astros will have Christian Javier on the mound, and Javier, 15 career postseason appearances, only 3 of them starts, but he has a 1.91 ERA across 37 2/3 of an inning. And on the opposing side, Max Scherzer will be back out on the mound, and needless I need to say anything about Max Scherzer. Max Scherzer is Max Scherzer. He is one of the best in the game for a reason, but postseason, he's 7-7 with a 3.58 ERA and 133 1/3 of an inning.
I'll tell you what, I wouldn't be surprised if this game is going to be a pitching duel between both Houston and Texas. And it's going to be a question of, we talked about for Arizona, they need to get their bats going. It's going to be a question of who gets their bats going first in this game between both Texas and Houston. But this series, it feels like it's a little bit more of a must-win for Houston, just because they're going to be on the road their next 3 games. And Texas only needs 2 games right now to take the series. But if Houston does end up going 2-1 in their next 3, with the fact that all 3 of these games are at Texas, I would say don't write off Houston. But when it comes down to it, this game 3 is very, very pivotal to what we could see play out throughout the remainder of the series. If we see Texas win, I'm not saying it's completely out of the realm of possibility that Texas takes it in 4. And I'll say the same thing about the NLCS. If Philadelphia ends up taking game number 3, it wouldn't be too surprising if we see 2 sweeps in the championship series for both the American League and the National League, which would be completely terrible for what both of our predictions were, because we both said 6 to 7 games for both of these series. But when it comes down to it, you take a look at the pitching that's going to be going on tonight in this game. It's going to be tough for either team's offenses to get anything going with how good Scherzer and Javier have been so far, not just in the postseason, but you talk about Scherzer being one of the best. Javier, really good in the postseason, 1.91 ERA. You don't get that ERA by being a middle-of-the-pack caliber pitcher, especially in the postseason. So it's going to be a nice pitching duel tonight.
And now, Matt, I will also say this and ask a quick question. Christian Javier, he was a starting pitcher for the Astros the majority of the season. He posted a 4.56 ERA, 159 strikeouts. and a 10-5 record on the season. So this is a guy that has switched into the starting rotation. We mentioned 15 postseason appearances, but only 3 of them starts. That may be something to worry about, but then you look back at that, oh, he's been in the starting rotation all season long. He's been a very good pitcher at times for the Houston Astros as well. Obviously, the ERA may be a little bit higher than what the Astros would want it to be, but at the same time, that ERA has your team in position to win games. And that's ultimately what you want to be at as a starting pitcher. You look at Javier, though, only this will be his 4th postseason start. That may be concerning, but you take a look at the experience he's had this season. Are you concerned with Christian Javier taking the bump and really a do-or-die game for the Astros in Game 3, going head-to-head with one of the greatest, not just in the game right now, but one of the greatest all time in Max Scherzer?
I'd be concerned if it was only a second or final third of the season we saw Javier get switched to a starting pitcher, but the fact that he's been a starting pitcher all season so far for Houston eases the nerves for, I would hope it would ease the nerves for Houston fans, but it's hard to ease the nerves when they're down 2-0 in the series right now. But if it was last month of the season, that's when Javier was thrown into the starting rotation and was listed as a starting pitcher for this team, I would say there would 100% be just reasoning for concern. But with the fact that he's been a starting pitcher for the majority of the season for this Houston team, I would say there's a little bit of concern, but I wouldn't be too concerned, especially with the fact that in 3 starts in the postseason, you're not playing against weak teams in the postseason. There's just no other way of putting it. Any team that makes it into the postseason in the MLB is a good team. 1.91 ERA in those 3 games that he started so far in the postseason. Like I said, you don't get a 1.91 ERA by being a middle of the pack or a not that good pitcher in the major leagues. So I would say, like I said, if he had been switched midway to the last few months of the season into that starting pitcher role, then there might be cause for concern. But since he's had a whole season doing it for Houston, I don't think that there should be many concerns.
And, Matt, you actually bring me into a great topic to talk about, and we're talking about that right now before we shift focus back to college football. We're continuing our talk from what we had yesterday. But out of any of the major sports, hockey, obviously football, NFL football, NBA basketball, Major League Baseball, you look at how the playoff formats are set up, and I'll be the first one to go out there and say, Major League Baseball, I think, is the toughest league out of any of the major 4 sports in America. It is the toughest league to make the postseason because you look at the NBA, more than half the league makes the NBA playoffs. You look at the NFL, you have 7 teams from each conference. So ultimately, you end up having just under half. Take a look at how many teams make it for Major League Baseball. 12. 12 for the entire league. It is the smallest postseason, and not only is it the smallest, but it's also the longest regular season. So when you look into things, you have a long season with a small window to make the postseason, and because it's such a long season, teams get hot at certain points, they jump up into the picture, then they fall out after a cold spell. You have to be, I'm not going to say perfect, but you have to be very, 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 very consistent to be a team to make the Major League Baseball playoffs. And that's why postseason for October baseball is so special, because you see truly the 12 best teams across Major League Baseball from April into September. They're making the playoffs.
And obviously, you take a look at the numbers when it comes to baseball and when it comes to MLB teams making the postseason. 12 of 30 teams making it in, and it's only been a few years that we've been saying 12 of 30 teams. It used to be 10 of 30 teams making it into the postseason.
Even before then, it was 8 of 30 teams. Before they extended the wild card to that wild card game, we used to see the 3 division winners and 1 wild card team make it.
And the only other area and another sport that I would say it's pretty tough to make it into the postseason, especially if you're a team that is on the outside looking in, I would say MLS trying to make it into the postseason is pretty tough, because it's not based off of record. It's based off of how many points your team has accumulated so far this season, based on your competition you faced off against, if you beat them, if you lost to them, that's another, because you can have a team that has a better record not make it into the postseason because they didn't accumulate as many points throughout the year. So I'd say there are a ton of teams that make it into the postseason in Major League Soccer, but I'd say it's pretty tough for MLS teams to make it in because, like I said, you can have a team that doesn't have as good of a record of you acquire more points throughout the year, and they jump you and take your playoff spot when you have a better record than them. But when it comes down to overall competitiveness, length of schedule, how many teams make it in? I think the MLB might have it topped as one of the toughest to make it into.
It's certainly tough, and I mean, that's one of the reasons why we've seen teams, obviously teams may go on dry spells from the playoffs because they've had bad years, but also good teams that end up just outside of the playoffs. I mean, the Reds just a couple of years ago, even the Reds this season, it's a very tough postseason to make it into, and I think that's one of the reasons why it makes it so competitive.
I mean, you even just take a look at, you talk about the Reds not making it into the postseason. You take a look at the amount of teams that were in the hunt when it comes to the National League and didn't end up making it into the postseason. You take a look at the number of teams that were above 500 this year that didn't make it into the postseason. There's not many other sports around that you can say a team that was above 500 does not get a spot in the postseason.
I mean, the NBA, you have multiple teams that make the playoffs with a below 500 record nowadays. The NFL, they extended that one playoff spot. Now there's 7 teams in each conference to make it after a 16-team conference, the AFC and the NFC. And I just swatted my mic. But any AFC and any NFC team, yeah, the majority of teams within those conferences don't make it, and you ultimately have to be. Obviously, you start in football, you see some divisions where, yeah, okay, an 8-9 team will win the division, they'll make the playoffs. But at the same time, you don't see teams with a losing record make the playoffs, but you still see teams who are 8-9, 9-8, hovering right around 500 in the playoff hunt. Take a look at baseball, on the other hand. It's almost a for sure given. You have to be at least an 85-win team to make the playoffs unless you're in a pretty tough or a pretty bad division.
And I mean, yeah, you talk about the NFL teams that are right around that 500 mark or just below it. I mean, take a look at Tampa Bay not too long ago in the NFC South. Didn't have that good of a regular season as opposed to some of the teams that were on the outside looking in, but they won the NFC South, so they made it into the postseason. So you see that. NFC East also a division that comes to mind in recent memory for teams that you take a look at some teams that didn't make it into the postseason that you feel like should have, and then the winner of the NFC East or the winner of the NFC South makes it in just because they won the NFC East or the NFC South. So when it comes down to it, you talk about, like I said, when it comes down to also, you have a ton of games to play in baseball. 162 outside of potentially making it into the postseason where you're going to have more than 162. But when it comes to total length of the schedule, how consistent you have to be throughout that length of time, the amount of teams that make it in, how difficult it is to make it in, I think the MLB is probably the toughest postseason to get into.
Matt, MLB, they've done such a great job over this just over the last couple of decades, extending the playoffs. We talked about it. You know, they only had 8 teams out of their 30-team league make the playoffs for quite some time. Then they increased it up to 5 when they went with the wild card play-in series, and now you have multiple wild card teams that make it to make it 6 teams in each conference, makes it 12 teams overall. Matt, do you think the Major League Baseball playoff format is still too small? Would you like to see them extend it? Not obviously, they just extended it last season, so it's not going to extend at least in the next couple of years. They're going to wait and see how this format plays out. But would you be opposed of seeing maybe an extra wildcard team make it where we see a 14-team playoff? The majority of the league still misses. They can go to the format that the NFL runs right now with a 14-team playoff. Your top seed, whoever wins the conference, does get the bye. And then you have 2 versus 7, 3 versus 6, 4 versus 5. Are you opposed to that? Because over time, in my opinion, postseason baseball is so special. And maybe this is just me being a fan of it, but I would love to see more postseason baseball. And not only that, we talked about it last week in the NL and ALDS. Buys hurt teams. You may be able to eliminate a bye, maybe we're starting to see some teams that were more dominant in the regular season continue to pick up momentum. I don't know. That's just a thought. I'd like to see it, though. It's more baseball.
To me, I don't think you I don't think you increase the amount of teams just for the main reason that you take a look at the wild card hunts that we saw this past season. Obviously, the National League, if you would have added a team, it wouldn't have really made that much of a difference. There was still a huge fight for teams. But in the American League, Seattle would have made it in, and there was nobody else that had a chance. There would have been no fight at all to make the postseason in the American League. There wouldn't have been one. You wouldn't have seen Seattle fighting in that last week to try to get their spot into the postseason, miss out by a game. They would have been up enough games going into that last week of the season over the team behind them. They wouldn't have had to have worried about what was coming up next. They would have been like, "Oh, we're in the postseason. We don't have to play that hard this week. We can just get ourselves ready for the post. We can just get ourselves ready for October baseball." Like I said, obviously the National League, it's not the same case with the amount of teams you saw fighting for those last few spots. But I think if you expand it, you have to wait and see what happens. Like you said, not too long ago did we see the change.
Just a couple years.
I think it's too early to change it if there is going to be any change.
I agree with that.
Personally, I like it how it is now. You talk about teams having a bye, teams not faring too well off of that bye in the wild card round, but if you end up extending it, you're singling out one team, the number 1 seed. You're singling them out as the only team to not have a bye. So when it comes down to it, I think if you use the argument of it's more hurtful to have a bye round in the postseason, then you should just extend it to 16 teams and make it to where there's no bye in the first round. Everybody gets to play in the first round of the postseason. So if that's the argument that's brought up, move it to 16, add 4 teams. I think it's, like I said, obviously time will tell, but at least when it comes down to the hunt for the postseason, I'd say the National League is probably one of the wildest hunts we've seen to make it into the postseason in recent memory in baseball.
Absolutely. And time will tell. Obviously, this new format's only been around for 2 years. I'm an advocate for more baseball. I'm a baseball guy through and through. I just love October baseball. The more of it, in my opinion, the better. Time will tell with that. But I think that's an interesting debate that we can bring up as well. I mean, with how they've increased it over the last decade or so, again, it's shot up from 8 teams to, 12 teams now, or 14 teams, I beg your pardon, over the last decade. So I think that's definitely something that, actually, my math was wrong. I told you earlier in the show, my math is not mathing. I beg your pardon. I was right the first time, 12 teams.
I love how you took that line from me, too, that your math is not mathing.
But anyway, I think that's an interesting debate to have, and obviously that debate will heat up in the future upcoming years as well. After we see this playoff format, we see a couple more years with it. It's time for a break. When we return, Caleb Williams, he's in the headlines once again. What for? That and opinions coming up next.
It's easy to take the air in your home for granted. But it's not just about being hot or cold. It's about having clean air. For some of us, this is critical. At McAfee, we'll provide you with long-term solutions to improve the air you breathe.
Do you need your inhaler, bud?
Oh, I'm good, thanks.
Breathe easy. Choose McAfee. It's easy to take the air in your home for granted. But it's not just about being hot or cold. It's about having clean air. For some of us, this is critical. At McAfee, we'll provide you with long-term solutions to improve the air you breathe.
Do you need your inhaler, bud?
Oh, I'm good, thanks.
Breathe easy. Choose McAfee.
Well, Caleb Williams is in the news once again, and I don't know if it's for a good thing or a bad thing. Caleb Williams reportedly came out and said that he is, before we get into this bit of a debate, Caleb Williams is unanimously the top quarterback right now in college football. He will be the number one pick if he declares to the draft, but that is a big if. He's gone out multiple times this season and the USC cornerback has gone out multiple times this season and has said that he can return back to college and make more money off of NIL deals for the
If anybody was paying attention last week,
it's a last week.
He was saying
reference.
NLI a lot.
It's a last week reference. But continuing on here, Matt, I looked at you and it's that best friend look that's just.
You looked and I smiled. I knew it was.
We've been
going
best
on.
friends since it's just
Forever,
a look.
pretty much.
Anyway, let's go on. So Caleb Williams, he went out a couple weeks ago and said that he can return to college and make more money staying in college than rather going into the NFL. Then he came out and said there's only 5 NFL teams he'd be willing to go play for. And now he went out and said whichever team takes him first overall, that reportedly this is what he said. Obviously, just reportedly. Whatever team takes him first overall, he wants partial ownership of that team as well. And Matt, to me, I think that that's a little bit too much. We saw Aaron Rodgers when he was traded from the Green Bay Packers to the New York Jets ask for partial ownership. And Aaron Rodgers is a veteran. He's been in the league forever, our entire childhood, it seems like. And he's one of the greatest to ever play the game. Aaron Rodgers, he is one of the greatest quarterbacks to ever play the game. The NFL shut him down when he asked for partial ownership in the Jets when he was traded from Green Bay to New York. Now we have a guy who hasn't even played an NFL snap asking for partial ownership of whatever team takes him first overall. And to me, Matt, if I'm a general manager in need for a quarterback and I have the first overall pick, I don't think I'm taking him. What we've seen from Caleb Williams, yes, no doubt about it, the talent is there. But it's the locker room presence and what he's bringing to the table and what he's proving to be right now is still at the college level. Again, this guy has never even played an NFL snap. He's proving to see, if I'm the general manager, I'm looking at him and I'm saying, oh, this very well could be a diva for my football team. That's a bad look on the franchise. That's a bad look for me. And he's already asking for he's already making all these demands, and he hasn't even played an NFL snap. To me, I think that's just outrageous.
Yeah, I can completely agree with you on that. The fact, and you even brought up, and I'm going to use your wording on this, it's a huge red flag for any team owner who's going to potentially have a high round draft pick. It's a huge, huge red flag when a player who, like you said, hasn't even played a snap in the NFL is coming out and saying that if you draft me, I want partial ownership of your team, because there's a very good chance. I'm not saying it's going to happen. Who's to say Caleb Williams in week 5 of his first season, if he starts in that first season, who's to say he doesn't get hurt and it's a type of injury that you're not really able to come back from? An example of that, I'm not saying RG3 wasn't asking for ownership of a team, but RG3 looked really, really good. Then he had an ACL injury. He just wasn't as good as he was before it. I'm not saying that that's going to happen to Caleb Williams, but it's possible. It's the NFL. You never know what's going to happen. You can have a quarterback like Tom Brady who seems like he's Iron Man and barely ever gets hurt on the football field and leads your team to Super Bowl after Super Bowl. Or you can have a quarterback drafted like RG3 who, and I say Tom Brady, he wasn't drafted highly like RG3 was, but still, when it comes down to it, quarterbacks, I mean, you can think about Joe Burrow, for example, if you want to go high draft picks and compare it to RG3 being a higher draft pick. When it comes down to it, Joe Burrow coming in, leading his team to success. Obviously, calf injury coming into this season. During the preseason, he's still looked pretty good so far this year as he's continued to heal, as he's continued to get better. Health-wise, he's continued to look better on the season. So when it comes down to it, though, you never know what's going to happen. You can have a quarterback that you draft 3rd overall, and they end up leading your franchise to 5 Super Bowls. You win 4 of them, and he goes down, and he could end up being a Hall of Famer. You can also end up picking a player 3rd overall. They have a really good season. They get hurt the next year, and they're nowhere near as good as they were year 1. You never know. It's the NFL. Anything can happen when it comes to players getting injured. We see it every single year. I mean, Nick Chubb, for example, running the football. I still think if/when he comes back to the Cleveland Browns, I think it's more of a when he comes back. I still think Nick Chubb can easily be a high caliber player like we've seen him be for Cleveland, but you never know. So when it comes down to it, you take a look at Caleb Williams never having played a snap in the NFL, already asking for partial ownership of whatever team ends up drafting him. I think that is a huge red flag to whoever has a high draft pick in the next draft, and not just the next draft. If he sticks with that, if he sticks with it and sticks with his words, not this upcoming draft, but the next draft after that, you have to keep an eye out on things like that, because you mentioned having a diva in the locker room. That only hurts teams. It never helps teams.
And not to mention, it only makes more of an impact the position you play as well. We've seen many of diva wide receivers, and they've gone on to have very successful careers. The quarterback position is one position you don't want to have a diva at. And that's proven to be true in times past as well. And there's no doubt about it. Caleb Williams is the best college football quarterback right now. He is one of the top prospects from any college football team before entering pro ever. But nobody has ever asked for partial ownership before you're even drafted. You're still in college. Joe Burrow, one of the most decorated quarterbacks after his 2019 season with LSU before the Cincinnati Bengals picked him, never asked for partial ownership. Trevor Lawrence, he's probably the most decorated quarterback in recent memory coming out of Clemson, and he never asked for partial ownership from the Jacksonville Jaguars. It's not something you see. And Caleb Williams, after doing this, and I would expect the NFL to shut it down. They shut down Aaron Rodgers, and we just mentioned Aaron Rodgers is one of the greatest to ever play the game. I don't think it's feasibly possible that he will get the partial ownership because the NFL is going to stand into the way. But Matt, with this request, the question becomes, what request is next from Caleb Williams? Because he's mentioned, oh, well, I can just go back to college. And then he went out and said, oh, there's only 5 teams I'd be willing to play for if I ended up going to the NFL. Now he's asking for partial ownership. The question is, what's next? Because it just seems like there is a snowball effect on request from top quarterback recruit Caleb Williams. And not to mention, does this open the door for other outlandish asks and requests from any other possible recruits either this season in the draft class or down the road?
And the one thing, obviously, it would be tough to get every single team to kind of get to the same mindset, but if you're going to have a player, like you said, Caleb Williams by far is the best quarterback in college football right now. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. He is the number 1 quarterback in college football right now. But the one thing that I would like to see, especially to set the precedent, I would like to see every single NFL team shut it down no matter how much you need a quarterback. I don't think that should come into account when it comes down to players making these kinds of requests before they've even played a snap in the NFL. I'm not saying that it needs to happen because, like you said, the NFL is probably going to shut it down themselves. But when it comes down to it, if a team decides to go with Caleb Williams and they decide to be like, okay, yeah, all that's going to do is, like you brought up, who's to say players down the line aren't going to do the same thing? If you shut it down now, nobody's going to want to do it ever again. Nobody's going to want to do it later down the line. If you shut it down now, you're going to look crazy trying to do it in the future. But if a team decides that, okay, we'll give you partial ownership of the team, we'll have you be our starting quarterback, that's going to set a precedent that quarterbacks in the future, if you have a player at the caliber of Caleb Williams, they can make those kinds of demands too. I think it should be shut down.
I completely agree. And again, I use the example, Trevor Lawrence never asked for that. Bryce Young never asked for that. Joe Burrow never asked for that. Nobody in any history has ever asked for that. And to be honest, I'm against players having partial ownership of the team. When you retire, whatever. You know, when you're retired, when you're done playing football, go be a partial owner. Go be an owner in general. Like, who cares? But when you're playing, there's so much that can happen. And think if, say, Caleb Williams, hypothetically, it's not going to happen, but hypothetically, if he were to able to get partial ownership and then played 4 years for that team, rookie deal expired, and left, he still has partial ownership of that team. And say the Bears pick him, hypothetically. Again, none of this is happening. Hypothetical situation. Then he went to the Packers. Then he still owns partial share in the Bears, and he could just kind of derail that franchise in the inside. I'm not saying he would do that, but there's so much business involved in the NFL that situations like that can happen. And I would even go out and say Patrick Mahomes, he's a great example. Patrick Mahomes is on pace to being the greatest and most talented quarterback we've ever seen. He is a stud, and that is point blank. Patrick Mahomes, he is the best in the game right now. For what he's done to Kansas City, he's got a key to the city. I mean, there's no question about that. He's got a key to the city. He can do anything in Kansas City. He's not getting partial ownership. And he is on pace to being the greatest player that we've ever seen. Obviously, right now, I would still say Tom Brady is within that title. But look at how young Patrick Mahomes is and what he's been able to do. He's still not asking for that. It's just a very, very, I don't want to say a weird request, but Matt, I think I completely agree with you. This is a request that you have to shut down right now before other recruits start flirting with that idea, because that's something that, and whatever team shuts it down, because NFL, believe it or not, there are probably some franchises that are smarter than the other, but they're all smart somewhere along the lines. They're an owner of an NFL team. It's their organization. It's their brand. They're all going to shut it down. And if they don't, the NFL is going to shut it down. They already have a few times in the past. The most recent one, again, to Aaron Rodgers. It's not going to happen, but just what a crazy request. A guy who has not ever played a snap in the NFL is asking for partial ownership in the NFL just because he's projected to be the first overall pick. No doubt about it, he will be the first overall pick. He is the best quarterback in the nation for college football right now, but still a guy who has never played an NFL snap.
And yeah, the other reason that it is an absolutely outlandish idea to have is because I mentioned the fact that who's to say Caleb Williams doesn't get hurt in the NFL? Not saying this is also going to be the case. Who's to say he's even going to be good in the NFL? We've seen there's been countless quarterbacks. Johnny Manziel comes to mind. I bring him up because I'm a Browns fan. But he looked amazing in college. Went to the NFL. What did he do? Pretty much nothing. Not saying that Caleb Williams is the exact same as Johnny Manziel, but college success does not always translate to the next level. It's possible that Caleb Williams is more of a mid-tier quarterback in the NFL, and he's not the next Patrick Mahomes. You never know in the NFL. So that's another thing that comes to mind too. A player, and you bring up the whole no snaps in the NFL. Obviously, he hasn't played a snap in the NFL. But when it comes down to it, you don't know how good a player is going to be until they step out on that football field week one and show what they're capable of. So when it comes down to it, it's a crazy, crazy idea to think and to want partial ownership of a team when you're still playing college football.
And Matt, again, that's just a red flag. I mean, here's a guy, when you come out of college, you're supposed to be grateful for the opportunity that you're going to have to go pro, no matter what sport it is, whether it's baseball, soccer, basketball, hockey, football, golf. You are happy for the opportunity. You should be happy for the opportunity to go pro. That is something special, and I have to get the exact percentages, but There's not a lot of people that do that. It is a very special moment. You should be very, very grateful. And with what Caleb Williams has done, naming the I can just go back to college. Okay, that's great. Go get your money. I know we had that debate, I think, a week ago on this Wednesday show. And then, of course, we talked about, he only mentioned that he wants to play for only 5 NFL teams. That's a red flag to me because you should be grateful for the opportunity to play for any of those 32 teams in the NFL because the opportunities in the NFL are very, very, very limited. And then he comes out and says this, if I'm the owner of a team, if I'm a general manager and I have the first overall pick, if I'm in need of a quarterback, I think I'm looking elsewhere. Because, again, I know I mentioned this earlier in the segment. I'm looking elsewhere. I don't want the drama. I don't want the diva. I don't want any of that. And I just don't want to deal with it. It's a red flag. It's a bad look on Caleb Williams. I'm looking elsewhere if I'm an owner or a general manager and have the first overall pick in need of a quarterback.
Yeah, I would say when it comes down to it, you talk about looking elsewhere. I mean, you've got quarterbacks like Drake May. You've got quarterbacks like Bo Nix. You've got a couple other names that don't have that mentality and don't have that I'm on top of the world mentality, nobody can bring me down type of mentality, that I'm the best and there's no one better than me. I'm not saying that's exactly what's going on in Caleb Williams' mind, but with what he's been saying, you kind of get that idea and you kind of get that feel from it, that's kind of what Caleb Williams has going on mentally right now, that I am him, no one else is better than me. I should get this. I deserve this. I'm only doing this. I'm only going here. You kind of get that feeling with Caleb Williams right now. And like I said, when it comes down to it, you take a look at other quarterbacks that could potentially enter the draft next year. You've got Drake May. He's looked phenomenal for UNC. He's got his team currently inside the top 10 when it comes to the rankings. So you've got other options at the quarterback position that you could potentially see being suitable for a number 1 overall pick. And like you said, when it comes down to it, if you're a manager and you have that number 1 overall pick and you do not like the attitude that Caleb Williams has right now, there's more options to look for that first pick.
Time for a break. Hour number 2 of our show coming up next.
Every day, we find ourselves on a path full of decisions.
It's me.
Sometimes small and sometimes big. Sometimes alone and sometimes together. At McAfee, everything we do is done with your comfort, health, and convenience in mind. She always wanted the best for you, and now you can rest knowing you've provided the best for her. Breathe easy. Choose McAfee. Every day, we find ourselves on a path full of decisions.
It's me.
Sometimes small and sometimes big. Sometimes alone and sometimes together. At McAfee, everything we do is done with your comfort, health, and convenience in mind. She always wanted the best for you, and now you can rest knowing you've provided the best for her. Breathe easy. Choose McAfee. Every day, we find ourselves on a path full of decisions.
It's me.
Sometimes small and sometimes big. Sometimes alone and sometimes together. At McAfee, everything we do is done with your comfort, health, and convenience in mind. She always wanted the best for you, and now you can rest knowing you've provided the best for her. Breathe easy. Choose McAfee.
Continuing our talk from yesterday in the college world, and then, of course, Monday from the professional world. Big games coming up this upcoming week across the state of Ohio, of course. Number 7, Penn State. Number 3, Ohio State on Saturday. The Cleveland Browns back in action this weekend as well, coming off that great upset win against the San Francisco 49ers. The Miami Redhawks taking a tough game against Toledo. That game will be played on Saturday. Miami looking to increase their winning streak to 7 games. Matt, we talked about it. Outside of that week 1 loss to Miami, Florida, the Miami Hurricanes, you make that game closer. There's an argument that if Miami were to win this game against Toledo, they could end up in the top 25. And even though they lost that first game of the season 38-3, you look at their next couple of games against Toledo and Ohio, there is a argument that you can possibly make that I don't think the Miami Redhawks will be in the top 25, but they'll be on the bubble. They'll be just on the outside on that bubble looking in if they win their next 2 games.
I would say for the Redhawks, if they get a dominant win against Toledo and then a dominant win against Ohio, then they're around that bubble team for being a top 25 in the country. And then I brought this up yesterday, and then it's going to come down to what happens around them for them potentially being a top 25 team in the country. Teams that are on teams such as Iowa, who are ranked 24th, teams such as Tulane, who are ranked that low when it comes to the top 25. It's going to come down to what happens to them, whether or not we see this Redhawks team potentially be a top 25 team. But I'm going to go back. I think it's, especially with it being 38-3, the final score of the game against the Hurricanes, I think for the Redhawks, they're going to have dominant wins against Toledo and against Ohio. And I'm not saying it has to be 63-0 type score lines, but if we see like a 35-7, 42-14 scoreline, something along the lines of that, that's a pretty dominant win. So I don't think it's completely impossible to see this Miami team potentially move up to a top 25 team in the country, just because you take a look at the fact that there's a potential this team could end up winning out throughout the remainder of the regular season. So when it comes down to it, you talk about the potential for Miami being a top 25 team. I think for them to be a top 25 team, you're going to have to wait and see what happens around the top 25 to potentially see this Redhawks team creep their way in. But we've seen MAC schools make it into the top 25 in years past. It's not completely out of the realm of possibility.
And you know, Matt, Miami, of course, tough game upcoming. Flip the script. Let's turn the page on over and talk about the University of Cincinnati Bearcats. The Bearcats, 4-game losing skid. They take the field this upcoming weekend against a very struggling Baylor Bears team. A must-win game for Cincinnati to get them back on track, especially Oklahoma State on the horizon. They play them in 2 weeks.
And yeah, this UC team, I think if they want to have a shot at taking down teams such as Kansas that they have I think it's their last game. If not, it's near the end of the regular season. That game against Kansas, they've still got Oklahoma State. They've still got West Virginia. They've still got Houston on that schedule too. You mentioned Baylor. They've still got some pretty tough teams. UCF, I think that's the only other game they have on their schedule this year, at least in the regular season. So you take a look at the fact that they've got Baylor coming up this week, and then they've got Oklahoma State. I think if UC really has any chance against the teams like West Virginia, the teams like Oklahoma State, the teams like Kansas that they still have yet to play, they need to win against Baylor if they want to get confidence and they want to get themselves ready for their games against some of the tougher teams on their slate of games throughout the remainder of the season. Houston, UCF, I think those are both games that the Bearcats can come away with. They can come out on top of, but you get the feeling that UC needs some confidence on that team. They need to get some confidence going. They looked good, at least in the early stages of the game against Iowa State, and then Iowa State just did not look back. 30-10 ended up being the final score, but earlier on, I had in my mind, I was like, okay, UC's hanging with Iowa State. And then the game kept going on. I'm like, they're no longer hanging with Iowa State. It's getting out of control now. But when it comes down to this UC team, they just need confidence. That's what this team needs. They need confidence. If they take down Baylor, that's going to give them confidence. And that's going to help them throughout the remainder of their regular season. I'm not saying that if they beat Baylor, they're going to go undefeated throughout the remainder of their regular season. But a win against Baylor is going to be good for this Bearcats team. If they can take down the Bears, they're going to get some confidence. Like I said, it's not going to mean they're going to go undefeated throughout the remainder of their schedule, but it's going to help. It's going to help this Bearcats team who's been struggling the last 4 weeks.
Baylor Bears versus the Cincinnati Bearcats. That'll be an entertaining matchup, this especially between the mascots. Matt, the number 7 ranked across the entire nation, Penn State Nittany Lions take a trip to the shoe to take on the number 3 ranked Ohio State Buckeyes in a big Big Ten East showdown.
I'll tell you what, you're probably going to say I'm repeating myself, but I'm going to say it again. I'll pretty much say it every single week. Ohio State plays a football game. You have to get Kyle McCord confident in this game as early as possible. Obviously, there's a chance that Emeka Ibuka returns for this game. There's a chance that Travion Henderson returns for this game. You'd love to have those pieces ready to go against a tough Penn State team, but it's also possible that they're not ready to go. So you can't plan to have Henderson ready for this game. You can't plan and scheme around having Henderson and Ibuka ready to go in this game. So when it comes down to it, like I said, you saw it in the game against Purdue. It's one of the few times Ohio State has looked really good to start off a football game. It's what we saw them do against Purdue. They were throwing the football earlier, and we've seen them throw pretty early in games this season, but we've seen more of wide receiver screens, throw out into the flat. Another thing that I did mention yesterday, but I did like seeing it for Ohio State in plays that Kyle McCord it wasn't 100% designed for him to roll out, but there was a check down right in front of his vision to throw it to, which is not something we've seen Ohio State really do pretty much at all this season. And with Kyle McCord not being as mobile of a quarterback as we've seen in years past at Ohio State, having that check down right in front of him, especially with him not being completely confident throwing the football everywhere, and not being confident, especially when he's on the move. But when it comes down to it, you see that running back right in front of you as you're rolling out and you're trying to scan the field downfield and there's nothing open. You have that check down right in front of you. McCord was hitting it in the game against Purdue, and it was working pretty well. And that's not something we saw Ohio State try to do that much prior to the game against Purdue. So you talk about another thing that can ease the confidence and potentially ease the worries of Kyle McCord. I'm not saying that every single play you need to have a running back running out into the flat, but having that extra option is definitely something that I would like to see Ohio State stick with. Not completely, not every single play against Penn State, but when you're throwing the football and there's a chance that Kyle McCord has to scramble out and try to scan down the field, potentially throw on the run, it's a lot easier throwing the football 3 yards in front of you to a check down route than trying to throw the football down the field while on the run too.
And let's focus on over and talk about professional. The Cincinnati Bengals, they are on a bye week this week, and they will try to rest up before their Week 8 matchup against the San Francisco 49ers. Matt, we mentioned this on our Monday show. I would expect the Cincinnati front office to maybe be a little bit more active on this trade deadline, maybe something to look at Week 7, because remember, deadline is just after Week 8. I believe it's that Tuesday at 5 o'clock after Week 8. At least that's what it's been in years past. So that's what I would assume that it would be again this season. Cincinnati, that big game against San Francisco in Week 8, the bye week this week. I would expect Cincinnati's front office to start looking if they're going to make moves at the deadline. If we go based on prior history, they will not. Cincinnati, they're not a team that make moves at the deadline. But if they are all in on winning this season, this is the time to make a move. You're at 500. Times you need to make a move. So Cincinnati on a bye, but there's still work to be done. Yeah, and then, of course, Cleveland Browns coming off that big upset win against San Francisco 49ers, 19-17. Well, the Cleveland Browns, they will be once again on the road taking on a very underrated 3-3 Indianapolis Colts, who also just reported that it is likely that Anthony Richardson, their young rookie quarterback, will be missing the rest of the season. It is likely, not official, but it is likely he will be missing the rest of the regular season. Gardner Minshew will be taking over the rest of the way for the Indianapolis Colts. very underrated Indianapolis Colts team. Could this be a trap game for Cleveland?
I just hope we don't see Minshew magic take place in this game against Cleveland. But when it comes down to it, you take a look at the Colts. They're 3-3 on the season. I would definitely say this team is a little more looked past than they are looked at when it comes to what this team has been capable of so far this season. So the fact that it's going to be at Lucas Oil Stadium obviously is going to help this Colts team out. But when it comes down to it, if there's one thing that can ease the minds of this Browns team, and they're definitely easing my mind, especially with how I thought they were going to perform last week against the San Francisco 49ers. If you're a Browns fan like myself, you've got to have confidence in this defense. And I didn't have confidence in this defense going into that game against the 49ers, but when you're able to hold San Francisco to what you did in that game, you got to be confident in them. I'm confident in this Browns defense. You yourself, Jackson, you were pretty confident in this Browns defense going into their game against San Francisco. The only reason that I didn't have confidence in him is because what we saw at Baltimore do to the defense. But like I've said, it seems like it doesn't matter if the Browns are Super Bowl favorites going into the year. They're probably going to lose to the Ravens in the regular season in those years. That's just because that's what Baltimore's been able to do to Cleveland. But when it comes down to it, if the Browns are going to come away with a win on the road against Indianapolis, it's going to come down to that defense again. And I have confidence in that defense. So I think this game is going to be a lot closer than what some people expect, but I still think Cleveland can pull this one away.
Matt, I think that this game against the Indianapolis Colts, to me, it just has the recipe of a trap game for Cleveland. Cleveland coming off the greatest win from any team this season. A 19-17 win over the hottest team, was the hottest team in the NFL at home against the San Francisco 49ers. This defense is legit. But now Cleveland, the question is, are they going to be riding too high after that win last week that they're still not fully focused upon this week against the Indianapolis Colts? Cleveland coming into this one 3-2, the Colts 3-3. The Colts a very underrated team in the NFL. You just mentioned that, Matt. They are one of the most underrated teams in the NFL this season, and they're one of the most looked past teams in the NFL. They lost their starting quarterback, but guess what? They have the best backup quarterback that you can have in Gardner Minshew. Minshew, I said it, he's the best backup quarterback you can have. Cleveland, big win last week against San Francisco. Are they going to be riding a bit too high? Game on the road against a very underrated Indianapolis Colts team. Matt, to me, this has a recipe for being a trap game for the Cleveland Browns.
And yeah, the only reason that I think it could end up being a trap game is, like you mentioned, if the Browns are looking, or not looking, but if they have the mindset of, man, we just took down San Francisco, we can beat anybody. If they have that mindset going into Indianapolis, there's a good chance the Colts could pull this game away. But if they have the mindset of, we took down San Francisco, on to Indianapolis, we're going to take this Colts team down. If they have that mindset going into this game against Indianapolis, I think this Browns defense and this Browns team as a whole, I think if they have that mindset against anybody this season, if they have it as Colts up next, all right, we took them down, on to next week. If the Browns have that kind of mindset, I think that they can take down a ton of teams in the NFL. But if they have the mindset of, man, we just took down San Francisco, we're pumped, they're going to lose. That's what's going to happen. This Browns team, if they have that mindset, there's a good chance they lose to Indianapolis. But if they have it as San Francisco's on the list, we took them down, on to Indianapolis. If that's their mindset, if they're looking, all right, if they take down Indianapolis, and then it's the mindset of, all right, Indianapolis down, on to next week. This Browns team can take down anybody. But it's if the mindset is that way.
Absolutely. I mean, the Browns can beat anybody when their mind is right. The Browns proved it last week that they can take down any team in the NFL. I don't care who you are. They can beat any team in the NFL, especially with that defense. The Cleveland Browns, the 2023 Cleveland Browns is the best version of the Cleveland Browns we've seen probably since they've won all the AFL championships back in the 40s, 50s, and so on. So Cleveland Colts, 1 o'clock, CBS, Week 7 matchup. And Matt, also the first time we've been able to talk about college basketball all season long. We're not really going to talk about it. Just quick mention, Ohio State and UD this upcoming weekend, a big charity event and the first preseason game of the year. Hard to believe that we're already starting to talk college basketball preseason, about ready to get underway. Season will be here in just a few weeks.
Yeah, we've brought it up plenty of times, and it's not to say it's not true, but time has just absolutely flown by. this football season. At least, I mean, we're already at week 10 of the high school football season, getting ready for the playoffs for high school football in the state of Ohio. So it's just crazy how fast time has flown by.
And speaking of that, the show has flown by as well. It's time for another break. When we return, we will make our Week 7 NFL game picks. That's all coming up next here on the TKDS Sports Network and Sports Now.
Every day, we find ourselves on a path full of decisions.
It's me.
Sometimes small and sometimes big. Sometimes alone and sometimes together. At McAfee, everything we do is done with your comfort, health, and convenience in mind. She always wanted the best for you, and now you can rest knowing you've provided the best for her. Breathe easy. Choose McAfee. Every day, we find ourselves on a path full of decisions.
It's me.
Sometimes small and sometimes big. Sometimes alone and sometimes together. At McAfee, everything we do is done with your comfort, health, and convenience in mind. She always wanted the best for you, and now you can rest knowing you've provided the best for her. Breathe easy. Choose McAfee.
Well, just another reminder, folks, we are live in chat. So these next couple of segments we are going to make our Week 7 NFL game picks. All the games being played in the NFL this upcoming week we will be making. Make sure to drop your picks down below. And also, coming up at the very end of our show, the last 15 minutes of the show, Hot Take Wednesday returns. Matt and I both have a couple of hot takes we're going to announce. And if anybody out there watching wants to drop any of their own hot takes, make sure to drop them once again in the chat below, and we will be able to display them on live air as well. That's all coming up next for Sports Now. Jackson Lightcap alongside Matthew Pennington. Week 7. Hard to believe it's already Week 7 in the NFL. The teams this week on a bye: Cincinnati, Dallas, Tennessee, New York, Carolina, and Houston. Man, I will say this. The one team that needs a bye, well, really, there's two teams I want to talk about on a bye week. The one team that needs a bye desperately is the Carolina Panthers. An unfortunate season so far this season for Carolina. They've put up the most points in their division, but they're 0-6. So out of any team in the NFC South, they've scored the most points, but they're 0-6 and have still not won a game. The potential's there. The future is there for Carolina. There's no doubt about that. They just need a break. They just need a bye week, get their mind straight. And another team that really hates to see the bye week coming when it does is the New York Jets, especially because they will not be able to feed off of the momentum that they've built the last couple of weeks with a nice couple of wins.
And yeah, I think if there's one team that doesn't want the bye week, it is that New York Jets team, because you just took down, you talk about the red hot 49ers, but you took down the only other team that had a chance of going undefeated on the season. So a little bit unfortunate that the bye week comes at the time it does for the New York Jets.
And let's move into it. First off this week, our Thursday night football game, the Jacksonville Jaguars will take a trip to the Superdome to take on the New Orleans Saints. That game will be played on Amazon Prime, 8:15 kickoff. And Matt, I will say this. Jacksonville on the road against New Orleans. A lot of people will look at the matchup and the teams that are playing, and they're just say, oh, it's Jacksonville. Jacksonville is a very talented team. With it being on the road in the Caesars Superdome down in New Orleans, Louisiana, This game is going to be close. It's going to be a very close game. I am still going to go with the Jacksonville Jaguars. They get a big win on the road, and it's going to be a win that can propel them for the rest of the season. We saw Cincinnati last season take a trip to New Orleans, and that's really where they found their offensive identity around this point in the season. I think the same thing happens with Jacksonville. This win is going to propel them for the rest of the season. Jacksonville gets a big win. It's going to be close. They're going to be down quite a bit. They're going to have a nice come-from-behind victory. Give me Jacksonville in this one. I'm going to go 28-24. Trevor Lawrence leads a game-winning drive touchdown.
I think I'm going to have to agree with you. I'm going to go with Jacksonville for my pick in this game, but I don't think it's going to be nearly as close. I'm not saying it's going to be a complete blowout for Jacksonville, but this Jaguars team has looked pretty good so far this season. I think it's going to be around the 31-17 scoreline, 31-20, something along those lines, but I'm going to have to agree with you. I'm going to go with Jacksonville in this one.
The reason why I say the New Orleans game is going to be so close is New Orleans defense. They have stepped up big this season, and not only that, to me, I think they're one of the most underrated and least talked about defenses in the NFL.
I can see that being the case, but like I said, I just think that Jacksonville offense has looked pretty good so far this year.
Moving on to our Sunday matchups, Las Vegas takes a trip to Soldier Field to take on the Chicago Bears.
I'm going to go with the Raiders in this one just because of the fact that the Bears, when it comes to what they're capable of so far this season, I don't think it's it's possible the Bears can take down the Raiders, but I just think when you've got Mad Max Crosby on the other side, I think it's going to be tough for this Bears team to really get much going on the offense. So I'm going to go with Vegas. I think it could be, you can really see anything in this game. You could see the Bears keeping it close, but you can also see the Bears getting absolutely destroyed by the Raiders. But I'm going to go with Raiders. Give me 35-17 final score.
I'm going to go with the Raiders in this one too, Matt. I mean, the Las Vegas Raiders, they have had their moments this season, but the reason why I'm going with the Raiders in this one is mainly because Chicago will be without Justin Fields. Justin Fields doubtful for this game. We've seen Chicago play with Justin Fields, and they're still losing football games. Now, I'm not truly on the bandwagon saying Justin Fields is a top 5, top 10 quarterback in the NFL, but he's significant. He's your starter for a reason. He's your franchise quarterback for a reason. When you lose your guy at the quarterback, it makes it a lot harder for teams to adjust. It makes it a lot harder because your whole offense then goes out of rhythm. Not only do you have your understudy taking over, your backup quarterback taking over for you, but there's a little bit of a drop-off when it comes to connections with your receivers. We've seen DJ Moore, Cole Kmet. They've both stepped up big this season. They may struggle coming up this week because they don't have the same chemistry with their backup quarterback taking the snaps rather than Justin Fields. That's the reason why I'm going Las Vegas. Even with Justin Fields, I'd probably go with the Las Vegas Raiders. Chicago just really has done nothing this season to prove to me that they are a team that can win decent football games. I think that we could see glimpses of that later on in the season, but at this point in the season, no Justin Fields. I hate to say it like this, but it is Chicago. Give me the Las Vegas Raiders in this one. Matt, I don't think this one will be too close. I think the Raiders go in. That defense is going to eat Chicago's offense alive. The Raiders' offense is going to explode. Matt, give me this one. Raiders 31, Bears 3. I think it's going to be a big game.
It's a pretty big score.
I think it's going to be going to be a big game for Las Vegas. Cleveland, Indianapolis. Matt, I'm going to go on and say this. It's a Cleveland thing to drop this game. You beat the 49ers and you drop this game. This is a different Cleveland team. This is a very different Cleveland team, and I just hit the mic again. That's how many times?
It's a critique that you talk about, leave your critiques in the comments or whatever. Someone's going to say that. Quit hitting your mic, Jackson. You keep doing it.
I've done that probably about a dozen times on the show alone.
Stay away from it. Don't get too close to it.
I like hovering over it. No, Cleveland, this is a different team. A very different team with a very different feel around this team. That defense is one of the best we've seen out of any team in the NFL going back over 50 years. And obviously we're only through 5 games of the season for the Browns. The numbers may alter over time, but I said this in the last segment. I'm going to say it again. This game feels like a trap game to me for the Cleveland Browns. Indianapolis, a very underrated team. Gardner Minshew, a very underrated quarterback. Cleveland, I still think that they're going to be living off that high against the 49ers. And to me, honestly, on the road, tough place to play in Indianapolis. It has all the makings and a great recipe for a trap game for Cleveland. Give me Indianapolis in this one. I think they just edge out the Browns. I do think that the Browns defense will hold a great game. I think it'll be offensive struggles for Cleveland. Give me the Indianapolis Colts in this one. I'm going to go with a final score. Oh, boy. Low scoring. I'm going to go Indianapolis 16. No, I think even that's too high. I'm going to go 13-10 Indy.
This is going to be the first game we disagree with each other. It's not just because I'm a Browns fan, but I think Cleveland keeps their head on their shoulders in this game, and they're not looking too much at the fact that they took down the San Francisco 49ers, but I still think this is going to be a close game. Give me Cleveland in this one. I think that Browns defense, I think the defense steps up pretty big in this one. Give me a final score 16-10.
Moving on, Buffalo at New England.
Buffalo at New England. I would say that if it was, say, Buffalo versus the Jets, or if it was Buffalo versus Miami, I would give it to the Jets or Miami. But it's New England. New England has struggled so far this season. 1-5 on the year. It is a home game for the Patriots, but I think that Buffalo, they're going to look at their game last week against the Giants. They're going to have it in their mind that, okay, maybe we try to turn things around. Like I said, if it was Bills versus Jets in this game, or if it was Bills versus Dolphins in this game, obviously the Bills have already played the Jets. They lost. If they've already played the Dolphins, they destroyed them. But the Bills just don't look sound on offense. But they're playing New England in this game. So I think that if there's any game for Buffalo to get their head back on their shoulders on the offensive side, it's in this game against the Patriots. I think that we see that happen. I think that Josh Allen is going to pick up the pace when it comes to the quarterback position. Obviously, one thing that has been talked about, and it's been noticeable, Josh Allen hasn't been running the football as much as we've seen in years past. I'm not saying that we're going to see that change, but I'll tell you what, if you're Buffalo, you don't want to completely rely on Josh Allen running the football, but it seems like it's two different offenses on the football field when you take away his ability to run the football. I'm going to go with Buffalo in this one. Like I said, if it was any other AFC East opponent that Buffalo could have played, if it was any other team, whether it be the Jets or whether it be Miami, I would side against the Bills. But it's the fact that it's a very, very struggling Patriots team in this one. Give me the Bills, 30-17.
I'm going to go with Buffalo in this one, too. And this is a New England defense that isn't the issue. The issue for New England is on the offensive side of the football, and there's a lot of question marks surrounding Mac Jones on whether or not he is the guy for the New England Patriots. I think those struggles continue. Buffalo's defense, very, very tough. They're going to give New England's offense fits. I will say this, Buffalo's defense will step up. They'll force a couple of turnovers, make it simple and easy starting field position for the Buffalo offense. I think the offense finally starts to find traction. I've said this about the Bengals. They're too talented of a team not to find their rhythm on offense. I think they start to find that a little bit later on in the game. Give me Buffalo in this one. I'm going to go with them 28-13 over New England. Washington, New York, at New York. The Giants, by the way, New York Giants, I guess I should say that as well. This one, with New York, they're coming off that big win against Buffalo last Sunday night. Or actually, I beg your pardon, they just dropped one to Buffalo. Sorry about that. It came down, they played it very, very close against the Buffalo Bills. They did not pull it out. Came down to a controversial call at the very end of the game. I think that that's a loss that is just going to continue to spiral for New York. Daniel Jones possibly still won't be back for this game. Tyrod Taylor, he looked good you don't know what you have in the table with Tyrod Taylor. He's great one game. The next game, we see why he's a backup. Washington, when you look at Sam Howell and what that offense has been able to do, a lot of playmakers on the offensive side of the football, a lot of playmakers on the defensive side of the football. I really like Sam Howell in this one. Give me Washington in this one. Washington makes a statement. Give me them in this one. I'm going to go 27-7.
I'm going to go with Washington as well in this game. And like you said, I don't think that this game completely spirals the Giants' season out of control, but it's definitely going to hurt this Giants team more than it's going to help with the fact that they could have taken down Buffalo, but they weren't able to do so. I'm going to go with Washington in this one. Give me a final score. I'm going to go 38. I'm going to go 38-10 final score for Washington.
Moving on, Atlanta at Tampa Bay.
Atlanta at Tampa Bay. I think the fact that it's at home for Tampa Bay is going to help. We've seen moments where this Buccaneers team seems like it's struggling a little bit, but we've also seen moments where this Buccaneers team has looked good. I'm going to go with Tampa Bay. I think it's going to be a closer game, though, especially with the fact that Atlanta's looking pretty good so far this season, too. But give me the Buccaneers. They're going to stay as one of the more top-tier teams in the NFC South. I'm going to say it's going to be a closer game, though. Give me 20-7, 20-17, I think is going to be the final score. But I'm going to go with Tampa Bay in this one.
I'm going to go with Tampa Bay as well. Tampa Bay, obviously, last week, tough loss against the Detroit Lions. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers, if this game was in Atlanta, I'd see it being a little closer. But give me Tampa Bay in this one. Give me them 20-14. And last pick before we make break, Detroit at Baltimore.
I'm going to go with the Lions in this one. I think that Detroit has just looked too good so far this season. And when I say too good, I'm looking at the consistency aspect for this Detroit Lions team. Obviously, they have one loss on the season, a close loss to the Seattle Seahawks. You take a look at the Ravens so far this year, there's been highs and lows for this Baltimore team. For the Lions, it's been a lot more of highs than there has been lows for this Detroit Lions team so far this year. So give me the Lions. I'm going to go with 27. I'm going to say 27-20 final score, but I'm going to give this one to Detroit.
Matt, I'm going to go with the home team in this one. And I will say this. If Baltimore was home, which they are, they're winning this football game. If Detroit was home, which they aren't, they're winning this football game. Home field advantage is going to play a huge factor in this game. And I know last week on the show, I think Baltimore is the most overhyped team in the NFL, and I stand by that statement. Their inconsistencies worry me. Their inconsistencies definitely worry me, but we've also said on this show, when they can put it all together, that is one of the top teams in the NFL. When they put it all together. They haven't put it together in quite some time. Actually, they haven't put it together since that Week 2 win in Cincinnati. They're at home. They know what Detroit brings to the table. I think Baltimore plays a very consistent game, all three sides of the ball, offense, defense, special teams. Give me Baltimore in this one. They're going to win it off the leg of Justin Tucker. Give me Baltimore 23-20. Time for a break. We'll be back. I wanted to see if you were going to say anything. Time for a break. We'll be back.
It's easy to take the air in your home for granted. But it's not just about being hot or cold. It's about having clean air. For some of us, this is critical. At McAfee, we'll provide you with long-term solutions to improve the air you breathe.
Do you need your inhaler, bud?
Oh, I'm good, thanks.
Breathe easy. Choose McAfee. It's easy to take the air in your home for granted. But it's not just about being hot or cold. It's about having clean air. For some of us, this is critical. At McAfee, we'll provide you with long-term solutions to improve the air you breathe.
Do you need your inhaler, bud?
Oh, I'm good, thanks.
Breathe easy. Choose McAfee.
Jackson Lightcap alongside Matthew Pennington, Sports Now. We are continuing on with our Week 7 NFL game picks. Moving on to the 4 o'clock games, Pittsburgh at Los Angeles.
You get this one. I took the last two.
You did take the last two.
Yeah.
Oh,
You get this one.
Okay, I'll go with this one. Los Angeles at home. I really, really love that Pittsburgh Steelers defense. I really, really love what they were able to do a couple weeks ago before the bye week against Baltimore. I think Pittsburgh, that bye week will hurt them more than help them. I think they're going to come out on offense flat in this game. Their defense is going, as always, their defense will keep them in this game, but that offense is going to be very flat. Because the offense is going to be very, very flat, I think Los Angeles' offense, their offense, really, I think this comes down to both teams have a great defense. Obviously, the Steelers have a better defense, but the Rams have a better offense. Rams at home, I think that their offense is going to outplay Pittsburgh's offense. Even though Pittsburgh has one of the top defenses in the NFL, the Rams offense will outplay the Steelers offense in this one. That'll be the difference maker. Give me LA in this one. Give me them 17-9. I think that Pittsburgh's only going to settle for field goals in this one.
Call me crazy. I'm going with Pittsburgh in this one. Just for the fact that, and just for the main reason that Kyron Williams, I don't think obviously it's not a completely one-sided team. You've seen a mix of passing and running the football being consistent and being consistently good for this Rams team. But we don't know what we're going to see. The backup also for the Rams, knee, questionable to play in the game, probably not going to play. They're looking at, I believe he's a rookie running back that the Rams are looking at to start in this game. Obviously, it's questionable for the backup behind Williams to play in this game, but Williams doubtful to play. We don't know what the running back situation is going to look like for this Rams team. And for the Steelers, there's a chance we could see Deontay Johnson back in this game for Pittsburgh. So when it comes down to possibilities to play in this game, it looks a little bit better for Pittsburgh on the offensive side. I'm not saying that the fact that Kyron Williams being out means that the Rams are going to look god-awful. I'm not saying that that's going to be the case because they are a really good passing team, but the Steelers also have a really, really good defense. And when you're not sure what's going to happen running the football and passing the football, like I said, the Rams, if they had Kyron Williams, I would go 100% with this Rams team. But we don't know what the running game is going to look like for this Rams team. And there's a very good chance that the offense isn't able to really do anything. So when it comes down to it, I think that the Steelers defense, they're going to be able to figure out what LA is going to bring to the table when it comes to their offense. I think Pittsburgh is going to come away with an upset. Give me the Steelers. I see it being close, though. Give me 24-23.
You know, the reason why I went with Los Angeles in this one is because Pittsburgh is very, very great at stopping the run. That pass rush is also really great. But you look at the weapons around Matthew Stafford, especially with Cooper Kupp. Cooper Kupp has come back, and with his first 2 games back, he's looking like prime Cooper Kupp from a couple of years ago. And obviously, yes, Pittsburgh's got a great secondary. Of course, Mika Fitzpatrick, he's back there as safety. But if Los Angeles can come into this game and get the ball out of Stafford's hands quick game, 5-10 yards, and march the ball down the field that way, keep Pittsburgh's offense on the sideline, that's going to open up the playbook a lot for Los Angeles. That's the reason why I went with Los Angeles. Arizona, Seattle, Matt, I know you took the last two before the Pittsburgh Los Angeles pick. I'm going to go with this one as well. Give me Seattle. Seattle, they're going to be angry after that loss last week. Jumbling up my words here. They're going to be angry after that loss in Cincinnati. That was a game that they ultimately should have won, and they didn't. They're going to be angry. A Cardinals team that is struggling. Seattle, I think, is going to get their revenge. They're going to play mad. I feel bad for the Arizona Cardinals because they are about to take a pounding. Seattle explodes on offense. Their defense steps up. This is my blowout of the week. Seattle 41, Arizona 10.
I'm going to agree. I don't think it's going to be as lopsided as you just said, but I still think it's going to be a Seattle-dominated game. It's a home game for the Seahawks. They've got the 12th man on their side. Arizona, only one win on the season, obviously. It was against a pretty good Dallas Cowboys team, but when it comes down to it, the Cardinals, they've looked so far this season, and like you mentioned, Seattle, they've got in their mind that we should have taken down Cincinnati last week, and we lost by 4. So I think this Seattle team, they're going to play with that chip on their shoulder. I don't see it being as big of a blowout like you said, but give me Seattle 33-7.
Green Bay at Denver.
I'm going to go with the Packers in this one. I think that they're going to be a little bit upset with the fact that they just ended up losing a game to the Raiders and then had a bye week to sit on that loss. So the Broncos, they've been struggling so far this season. They've only got a win on the year. Give me the Packers in this one. I'm going to go 28-20.
I'm going to go with the Packers on this one as well because, Matt, I like how you summed it up. Team that lost the game a couple weeks ago against the Raiders. They had a bye week to sit on it. And within that game, Jordan Love did not play great. So, Jordan Love, who we've seen glimpses of his full potential this season, but because of how he played against the Raiders a couple weeks ago, and then had an open week to sit on it, that's not going to sit well with Jordan Love. Jordan Love, he's a competitor. He's a lot better than people are giving him credit for. On social media, there's a lot of people dogging on Jordan Love. Jordan Love, he's a first-year starter. That's point blank. He's a first-year starter. Obviously, he's going to make mistakes. Jordan Love, he sees that. He sees the criticism. He's got a chip on his shoulder in this game. Give me Green Bay in this one. Green Bay wins it 28. I'll go 28-17. Los Angeles, Kansas City. It's at Arrowhead. I'm very high on the Chargers still. I know that the Chargers record does not show that they're a great team right now, but the amount of talent that's on that team for the Los Angeles Chargers, it's hard for me not to be high on them. But I am more high on the Kansas City Chiefs. The Chiefs are playing good football right now. I don't think that they've played their best football of the season. The Chiefs are the Chiefs. They have not played their best football. They've lost one game. They're on a nice little winning streak. They lost the home opener again to start the season against Detroit. Detroit's a really good football team. Kansas City has come nowhere close to playing their best football this season, but they're playing good enough to win. That's what great teams do. They're at home. Arrowhead, tough place to play. Give me Kansas City in this one, 34-21.
If this game was played at SoFi Stadium, I would go with the Chargers. Plain and simple. If it was played at SoFi Stadium, I would go with the Chargers, but it's being played at Arrowhead. So I'm going to have to agree with you on that one, Jackson. I'm going to go with the Chiefs in this game. If it was played, like I said, if it was a home game for the Chargers, I would go with LA just for the fact that you took a close loss to the Cowboys on the chin. Austin Eckler didn't look amazing in his return, but you get the feeling that with Austin Eckler, it's only a matter of time before he goes back to what we saw in week 1, where he looked pretty good against Miami.
I hope so. He's my fantasy running back.
You're telling me he's the fantasy running back for me that I've had to sit on and see not play since week 1 of the season. But I think it's only going to be a matter of time before we see Austin Eckler be more productive on the team. And like we said, when it comes down to the Dallas defense, they've looked really, really good so far this year. And when you've got a running back coming back off of an ankle injury, there's a chance that a really good Dallas defense is going to play the way we saw them play against the Chargers back on Monday. So, like I said, if it was played at home and if it was played in LA, I would go with the Chargers in this one, but it's a home game for the Chiefs. They didn't look that good against the Broncos back on Thursday night, but they've got those few extra days to try to figure out what needs to be improved on when it comes to the offense. So give me the Chiefs in this one. I'm going to go with, just with the fact that it's an AFC West game, it's going to be probably a closer game. I'm going to go 24-20 final score.
Matt, these next 2 picks, the only 2 games we still have remaining to pick, I have a very, very brief summary on who I'm going with and why. Miami at Philadelphia, even though Miami's offensive firepower, we've talked about it, that defense, we talked about this Monday, that defense is a little concerning. Philadelphia, they got a chip on their shoulder. That's a game in New York that they shouldn't have lost. It turned out to be a trap game. Philadelphia is going to play angry. Jalen Hurts is receiving a lot of backlash for that game, rightfully so. He threw 3 picks. He did not look like Jalen Hurts, but some people are out there trying to say that he's outside the top 10 when it comes to quarterback rankings. There's no way. Quarterbacks all have bad games. Jalen Hurts is going to show his full potential. And to be honest, Philadelphia at home, I'd like to say that this game is close, but that defense, I think, has its way with Miami's offense. And, of course, Philadelphia's offense has their way with Miami's defense. Matt, I know you're not going to agree with me here on the score prediction. I think Philadelphia wins by 3 scores. Give me 38-17 at home. Philadelphia is going to have a big, big, big game.
You say I might not agree with you, but you know what? We've got a hot take segment coming up. It was going to be my hot take that the Philadelphia Eagles destroy Miami. I think that when it comes down to it, you take a look at who Miami's played so far this season. You take a look at their one loss on the season being a very big loss to Buffalo. And then you take a flip at the other side. You take a look at the NFC team that's playing in this one. They just lost a game that they really shouldn't have against the Jets. So Philadelphia, they're going to come into this game mad. They're not going to like the fact that their undefeated season just got taken away from them by the New York Jets. And then the Dolphins, like I said, they've played really, really good so far this year, but they haven't really played against that good of teams. So when it comes down to it, obviously the Dolphins coming off of a pretty big win against Carolina, but the Eagles, they're also going to be pretty angry that they just lost to the New York Jets. So I'm going to go with the Eagles in this one, 38-10.
And last but not least, our Monday Night Football game, San Francisco at Minnesota. Matt, I know I've taken the last few. I'm going to take this one too. No Justin Jefferson. Vikings have struggled. Give me San Francisco in this one. Playing with the chip on their shoulder, San Fran wins this one big. I think they win it 34-17.
Yeah, I think
with or without CMC and Deebo Samuel.
Yeah, I think the 49ers can take this game against the Vikings. And like you said, obviously, Justin Jefferson not going to be in this game for the Vikings, and there's a chance that I think it's more likely that we don't see Deebo Samuel, but it's a possibility that we see Christian McCaffrey play in this one. But I'm going to go with the 49ers in this one. With or without Deebo, with or without Christian McCaffrey, I feel confident in the San Francisco team bouncing back after a loss to my Browns 19-17. But I think it's going to be, give me 24-13 final score, but I think it's going to go into the ways, and I think it's going to go into the hands of the San Francisco 49ers.
With that being said, that'll wrap up our Week 7 NFL game picks. Matt, real quick before we send it to break, our last break of the show, we're going to flip it to the college level. Final score prediction, Ohio State, Penn State.
You already had this yesterday.
Repeat it.
31-21. I'm going to go with Ohio State. I'm going to stick with my score prediction. Just don't take it and say 31-21 when you meant 28-17, I think is what you said yesterday.
Ohio State wins at 28-17. Hot Take Wednesday coming up next, and we'll wrap up our show on Sports Now and the TKDS Sports Network.
It's easy to take the air in your home for granted. But it's not just about being hot or cold. It's about having clean air. For some of us, this is critical. At McAfee, we'll provide you with long-term solutions to improve the air you breathe.
Do you need your inhaler, bud?
Oh, I'm good, thanks.
Breathe easy. Choose McAfee. It's easy to take the air in your home for granted. But it's not just about being hot or cold. It's about having clean air. For some of us, this is critical. At McAfee, we'll provide you with long-term solutions to improve the air you breathe.
Do you need your inhaler, bud?
Oh, I'm good, thanks.
Breathe easy. Choose McAfee.
Come on, guys, let's call Daddy. Hi, Daddy.
Hi!
How you doing?
So the furnace is on its last leg, babe. And I just don't know what to do.
I wish I could be there to help.
Being away is always difficult, but it doesn't mean you can't make decisions together. You can count on us to keep your family comfortable.
Hey, buddy, how's it going?
When are you coming home?
It's gonna be soon.
Faster than you know it, I'll be home.
Breathe easy. Choose McAfee.
Well, it's time for everybody's favorite. It is Hot Take Wednesday. A fan favorite returns. The final 5 or so minutes of the show, Matt and I will be making our hot takes for the week. Matt, we'll let you kick this one off. Go ahead for it. Hot Take Wednesday. What's your hot take for the week?
Well, you know what? You ended up kind of bringing it up and saying that I wouldn't agree with it in the prediction segment, but you know what? That was going to be my hot take for this week. I'm going to stick with that hot take. I think Philadelphia is going to destroy the Miami Dolphins, even if, like, it's a hot take. It's supposed to be an outlandish take, but I can completely see it happening, and I think it's going to happen. I think that the Philadelphia Eagles, when you take a look at the fact that Philadelphia just lost a game to the New York Jets, a game that they really shouldn't have lost. Like you said, Jalen Hurts threw 3 picks. I don't see that happening against the Miami Dolphins defense. And I think Miami, we saw what happened when they played against Buffalo. It wasn't that close of a game. You take a look at who Miami has played throughout the rest of the games that they've played so far this season. They haven't really played many good teams outside of their loss to Buffalo. So the one team that you can say was a good team they've played is the Chargers, who sit at 2-3 on the season. So when it comes down to it, the reason that this is more of a hot take is the fact that right now the Eagles are only favored to win this game by 2.5 points at home. But when it comes down to it, you take a look at what both teams have been able to do. You take a look at the fact that, like I said, the Dolphins coming off of I believe it was 42-14 win against the Carolina Panthers, and then you have the Eagles losing to the Jets. I think that that's just going to stew for the Eagles. I think that they're going to come into this game angry. I don't think it's going to be that close of a game for the Dolphins. Like I said, what did I say my score prediction was? 38-17, something along those lines, 38-10, something around there. I just don't.
I said 38-17. I think I don't know if you gave a score prediction for that game.
I did. I think I said 38-17. I think I did say 38-17.
We're going back watch film.
But still, I think that no, I said it was going to be a 4-score game. I said 38-10 because I said you said it was going to be a little bit closer.
I said 38-17.
I think I said 38-10 because I know my score prediction was a 4-touchdown win for this Eagles team, but I'm going to go and I'm going to stick with it. My hot take is going to be the Eagles absolutely destroy the Miami Dolphins this week.
That is a hot take I can agree on. I think that it's going to be a blowout in favor of Philadelphia. My hot take for the week, I said this also in our game picks, I think it's a trap game for the Cleveland Browns. Cleveland, of course, it was a tremendous win against the 49ers. I think they hold on to that win a little bit too long, and I think they overlook because take a look at the next week. They have a very tough Seattle Seahawks team on the road as well. After the win, I just had my mic again. There it goes. That's probably 15 times in the show. We'll keep count tomorrow. And it's a 3-hour show tomorrow. But Cleveland, coming off that big win against San Francisco, I think that they're going to get ahead of themselves. They're going to look ahead to the tougher their two opponents on the road against Seattle. So now you're looking ahead too far in the schedule. Now you're also still living off the hype of beating the hottest team in the NFL at that current time in the season, San Francisco 49ers. The Colts, they're not projected to win this game. Tough defense for Cleveland. They are without their starting quarterback. Gardner Minshew will be getting the start. Indianapolis, they're a very, 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 very underrated football team. They're a very good football team. At home, if this game was at Cleveland, I'd go vice versa. But at home, it has all the recipes for being a trap game for the Cleveland Browns. That's the reason why I think it is going to be one. I said that Indianapolis was going to win this game. I'm sticking with it. That's my hot take. It's a trap game for Cleveland. Indy comes away with the win at home.
And I'm going to disagree with you on this one. The only reason I disagree with you on this one is the fact that obviously it's different. I'm not a head figure for the Cleveland Browns. I'm not one of the coaching staff for the Cleveland Browns.
That'd be kind of cool, though.
It would be. But especially since I love the Cleveland Browns. But still, when it comes down to it, you talk about the fact that the Colts are a very, very underrated team. I think that the Cleveland Browns are going to be able to realize that the Colts are a very, very underrated team. And obviously, you love the fact that Minshew is going to be the quarterback, and you talk about good backup quarterbacks. Minshew's the guy you want to have as your backup. But when it comes down to it, I think the Browns defense is just going to be a little bit too much. And like I said, I could see it being a close game. I think my score prediction was 16-10, something along those lines, but I still think that Cleveland comes away on top.
And with that being said, that'll take us to the end of our 2-hour show. Folks, just another reminder, tomorrow's show will be an extra hour long. We will be live tomorrow from 4 p.m. to 7 p.m., and we will shift focus away from college and professional talk. We will talk about the updated playoff picture for every region in the state of Ohio for high school football heading into Week 10. We'll also take a look at what scenarios teams that have not clinched a playoff spot can clinch this upcoming week and what they need to do. Week 10, the last week of the regular season for the state of Ohio when it comes to high school football coming up tomorrow. That will all be coming up on our show. And Matt, we're actually going to have a few guests as well on the show. First guest of the new show format. I'm excited for that. Alongside Matthew Pennington, our engineer, Kevin Fowler, I'm Jackson Lightcap. Thanks for dealing with us for these past 2 hours. And we'll talk tomorrow, 4 to 7.